Good afternoon. I'm Mike Van Dusen, Deputy Director of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, and a hearty welcome to all of you, and a very special welcome to Ambassador Palush and Ambassador Kacher. We are very happy here at the Woodrow Wilson Center to host the 6th Annual Czech and Slovak Freedom Lecture. This has been a very important series for us over the years, and we look forward to today's lecture. It is being webcast live. Thank you again for being here, and I turn over the floor to Ambassador Kacher.
Thank you. And this is really a pleasure and privilege to have a chance to make special introduction for this series of Czech and Slovak Freedom Lecture speech, because it's not only the series and Czech and Slovak heritage and the special day which we celebrate today, and it's National Day to both of us, both of our nations. The day which I think in modern history of Czechs and Slovaks is the most important day, at least in my judgment, that would be the most important day, when Czechs and Slovaks, after 40 years of communism, find the way back to family of nations and to mainstream of European politics where they always belonged. And I'm going to introduce men who in this group anyway needs very little introduction, so it's easy for me. The man who stood at that time of this extremely important event and played an extremely important role, Martin Paloš, Ambassador Martin Paloš, who's been ambassador to the United States for more than 4 years now, having very distinguished career in Czech Foreign Service, having a fine academic education, but first of all, the man who signed Charter 77 in the years when this was a very difficult personal decision to make, someone who always fought for freedom and for the idea of freedom and democracy, and someone who now rightfully has been representing Czech Republic, and in a sense, you know, I still take it part of Slovak and Czech family, representing his country with the nation which I think is the strongest anchor and defender of those values which are so dear and which are so much depicted and symbolized by the holiday day by 17th of November, the day of Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. Few details from his life. He was born in 1950, October 14th, doctor degree of natural sciences in chemistry from Charles University in Prague, philosophy and social sciences graduated in 77, law 96-99. He was the secretary of Charter 77 as the first secretaries of 77, served as spokesman for this human rights group, was founding member of Civic Forum, which was founded in November 89. You would all remember the importance of Civic Forum. He was elected to the Federal Assembly in 1990, member of Foreign Affairs Committee, joined Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Czechoslovakia as advisor to Minister Dinsbier, and was Deputy Foreign Minister from 1990 to 1992. Martin, I pass floor to you, and I just want to tell you that it's been a great privilege and personal joy to be to serve with you and to be a friend of yours. Thank you so much. And to all of your family, because I see Paula and 2 kids.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rastislav, for this nice introduction. First, I would like to thank the American Friends of Slovakia, the American Friends of the Czech Republic, and of course the Wilson Center for inviting me to deliver this year's Czech and Slovak Freedom Lecture. It is indeed a distinct honor for me and a great challenge. I will add to be offered an opportunity to participate at this important event after such distinguished personalities having spoken here before me, Michael Novak in 2000, Madeleine Albright in 2001, Adam Michnik in 2002, Václav Klaus in 2003, and Timothy Garden Ash in 2004. Today we celebrate the 16th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, which removed from power the communist regime in Czechoslovakia, but it is also one of the last days of my tour of duty as the Czech Ambassador to the United States. So allow me to use this opportunity to offer to you a couple of thoughts concerning the nature and the current state of the Czech U.S. relationship. The world finally opened before us in November of 1989 after the bipolar political architecture that had divided Europe for more than 4 decades collapsed. The basic goal of our new foreign policies became clear and simple. We wanted, as did Hungarians, Poles, Slovaks, and all other inhabitants of our region, suddenly liberated from the captivity implied by their previous status within the eastern zone of the Soviet influence, to rejoin the West and to return to mainstream European civilization, where we culturally and historically belonged. Such a goal required us not only to design and successfully implement all of the steps and tasks necessary for our own democratic transition, but also to redefine the relationships with all our major international partners in Europe and in the world. We had to reintegrate Czechoslovakia, and after the peaceful separation of both the Czech Republic and Slovakia, as soon as possible into the international institutions and arrangements capable of providing us with the necessary security guarantees and enabling us to protect our newly regained freedom against all possible future threats. We needed to define and pursue our own national interests, not with a kind of parochial, self-defensive point of view, driven by the endemic inferiority complex of a small nation, but with a broad, generous, and worldly perspective that can be shared with all other freedom-loving nations. The renewed relationship with the United States was, for obvious reasons, one of our highest priorities. If freedom was what we wanted, the United States was expected to resume, alongside the democratic countries of Europe, the role of our major strategic ally. There was plenty of historical evidence justifying the need for such a strategic partnership. And on our side, also a bitter experience with the loss of freedom in the ideologically divided world. The American presence in Europe was crucial at the moment of our liberation from the Soviet yoke. Throughout the whole 20th century, it was the United States who stood for the defense of the very idea of freedom and open society. It stood against its enemies, attempting to usurp power in the old continent, to press its population under the control of totalitarian governments, and once and for all to re-evaluate all the values constituting the very essence of our European Western civilization. It was the United States whose military intervention in the last stage of the First World War tipped the balance in the duel between European democracies and theocracies, as Masaryk used to say, for the benefit of the former, and which helped secure the victory of democratic allies over the theocratic Central Powers. It was the United States that supported the principle of self-determination of nations and helped decisively with the creation of a democratic Czechoslovakia as a part of the New World Order which emerged after 1918. It was the United States that played the crucial role in the defeat of German Nazism in the Second World War in 1945. And again, it was the United States that helped Europeans start the process of European integration in the aftermath of the war that stretched a nuclear umbrella over the western part of the continent in order to save its freedom and contain communism, another most likely even more dangerous and more deadly variety of the plague threatening the European civilization in the zone of the Soviet influence. I still remember vividly the first trip of President Václav Havel to Washington and New York in February of 1990. That trip sent a clear message regarding the very nature of this new relationship and laid the firm foundations for the manifold forms of future Czech U.S. cooperation. The Masarykian and Wilsonian legacies came to life again and were rightly evoked on this occasion by both sides. The assurances of American government that we would be given all possible support to overcome all the challenges and obstacles lying on the unexplored and unknown road from a closed open society were borne at home by us as a vital sign of hope. It was an invaluable boost to our political ambitions and expectations. Reviewing the years of our transition and celebrating today the 16th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution, one thing can barely be denied. The United States indeed has honored fully its commitments to helping us return to the family of European democracies. The United States played an indispensable role in spreading and securing the idea of freedom in our part of the European continent, supporting unequivocally the desire of the countries of Central and Eastern Europe to finally obtain the necessary security guarantees, making their region, at least for the time being, safe for democracy. It is hardly imaginable that without the political will and determination of the United States, NATO would have started to expand to the east and to accept the new members. It is also true that without the new transatlantic agenda set and pushed for by the US government, whose ultimate goal is to make Europe finally whole and free, the current European politics focused on the future of European integration would miss an important element without which we might be seeing quite a different political architecture, replacing the collapsed bipolar model. A multipolar international system much more fragile and unpredictable. An international system certainly less friendly, especially to smaller democratic countries, finding themselves too often sandwiched between bigger powers, trying to impose their will on them and determine their history. A world order less capable of protecting freedom in monuments where the global community of democracies is confronted with international terrorism and other new threats emerging in the beginning of the 21st century. There is no doubt that the relationship between the Czech Republic, a NATO member since 1999, and a member state of the European Union since 2004, and the United States is stronger than ever before. It is evident by the figures indicating the trends in bilateral economic cooperation and ties between our armed forces. The same can be proven if we focus on culture, education, tourism, and if we highlight the cooperation between our cities and regions or comment on the unprecedented level of informal communications between the ordinary citizens of our countries. The relationship is certainly flourishing. Nevertheless, it would be entirely inappropriate to its nature to idealize or even ideologize it. We would pay poor service to ourselves if we wanted to see it through rose-colored glasses and ignore the fact that it is evolving in real time and in actual historical context. First of all, we must not disregard the fundamental reality that this relationship is asymmetrical. We have to be aware and to take into consideration that the American and Czech perspectives are and must be by definition different. That the democracy in America, which Tocqueville found so fascinating and analyzed with still unmatched insight and clarity, and democracy in the Czech Republic are two different varieties of one and the same species. The national interests of the only remaining global superpower and of a small Central European state simply cannot be identical. Keeping the Czech-American relationship strong in the future presupposes for sure not only remembering all the things we have in common, but also understanding the sources, be they historical, cultural, or political, of our eventual differences. These differences have shaped our relationship through its duration, but the way they have resurfaced in our current situation in the beginning of the 21st century requires our serious attention. Through these differences, we are provided with a unique opportunity to rediscover and to restate its most important dimensions. Therefore, let's consider in this context the dramatic shift in our own perception of the political reality between 1989, when we set out on our current journey, and now, when we are proudly celebrating the 16th anniversary of this remarkable event. 16 years ago, we were, for very good reasons, fully focused on ourselves, on our own situation, which was making headlines in the world media, and which dramatically changed at the time the agenda of all important political meetings and negotiations. We asked for and expected the support of world democracies, and we were grateful for the meaningful advice and assistance. Now, in the fall of 2005, we know pretty well that our own story, our return home from Babylonian captivity, was just the beginning of a much bigger and far-reaching historical turn. That there was no Europe to return to, as one of the favorite slogans of 1990 was pronounced. The world of the 21st century as a whole was going to be a different place from the previous era. The fall of communism in Europe certainly didn't bring Europe's history to its end, as some enthusiastic apostles of modern European liberalism seem to have believed. Our revolution of 1989 was rather an event announcing the arrival of a new and still unknown era, an event that did not resolve once and for all our Czech question by making us free again, but has revealed at the same time the depth of crisis that had stricken with the twilight of modern age, the whole European and Western civilization. Not only the new democracies, but as well the European political architecture are now at stake. The whole world is changing, and also the role of the United States, which is being tested and reconsidered in our current turbulent times. Being asked where the whole mankind is heading, confronted with so many challenges of globalization, exposed to all sorts of new, unexpected and unprecedented threats, the only honest answer we can offer is that we don't know. The question today is not, as it was 16 years ago, whether and how successfully we were able to apply all the old and well-tested ideas Ralph Dahrendorf was talking about in his seminal Reflections on Revolutions in Europe, published in the spring of 1990. The ideas constituting the spiritual basis of an open society safely embedded in the past world of European modernity. The question is not whether we are able to build and sustain all institutions in which and through which such a society is capable of existing. The answer to this question is a clear yes. We made it, and we are now a part of the West. The questions that now need to be considered are: what is our role in the changing world of today? How we can efficiently protect the freedom we have miraculously regained 16 years ago, side by side with our new allies? What are our national interests in this new situation, and what means should we choose for their realization? Speaking about the United States, not only our key strategic ally on our journey to democracy, but a partner to whom we owe more than anyone else for our current freedom, the questions that must be addressed are: what are our stakes in the test that the American leadership in the world is currently undergoing? Is there any role for us to play? What would be for us this test's best outcome? Václav Havel said in his speech before the joint session of the US Congress in February of 1990 that there was only one thing that we could offer for all the support and assistance: our experience with the totalitarian enslavement, and eventually the knowledge that has come out of it. Has not the time arrived to finally pay back? Nonetheless, if it is the case, what is this knowledge to which President Havel was referring? Is it related exclusively to our past? Or is there something in this knowledge which can help bridge that gap discussed so powerfully by Hannah Arendt, existing between the past and the future? I came here less than 3 weeks after September 11 of 2001, and my 4 years in Washington was indeed a period demonstrating the depth and seriousness of our contemporary crisis. The short period of consensus, both within our societies on both sides of the Atlantic and in the context of our transatlantic partnership, when the solidarity with the victims of barbarous attacks against the United States became the dominant factor in the realm of politics, America stood united, and we all declared ourselves Americans in these days, has been followed by a much longer and still continuing period of serious disputes and controversies. Both here in the United States and in most European countries, the public discourse has been dominated ever since by all sorts of explosive, value-charged questions, having power to divide the population into the antagonistic camps, whose inhabitants are fighting fiercely against each other, incapable of leading a dialogue and just defending their pronounced positions, locked into the territories, if I'm allowed to use the American metaphor, of their own, either red or blue states. It is not surprising that the far most explosive issue of this kind has turned out to be the US-led invasion into Iraq, with all its domestic and international consequences and questions it has raised, not only adding fuel to the heat of ongoing political debates within our own national communities, but triggering an unprecedented controversy between Europe and the United States, testing the strength and viability of the transatlantic bond forged throughout the 20th century. I'm not willing to go now into the heart of the Iraqi controversy or of any other controversial issue dominating today's political discourse. Instead, allow me to make just 2 general remarks or observations concerning our current dilemmas and debates. First, I would recommend to all those who feel strongly about belonging to one or another antagonistic camp to try to enlarge the horizon of their argument and begin to see our situation today in a broader historical context. Has not the whole history of relations between Europe and America? We can just take the American Revolution as the most evident example of this kind, been driven by all sorts of conflicts and disagreements. But has it not, at the same time, been always true that the old continent of Europe and the new world of America are tied with powerful bonds that make them, even in the moment of their disagreement, to parts of one and the same Western civilization? Is it not the mutual solidarity between Americans and Europeans, their ability to understand each other and to resolve in the end all the disputed issues, what must be seen as the very nature of this civilization? And if we decided to further examine its deeper roots, would not we discover that from its very beginning in antiquity, it has never been a static formation, just maintaining the status quo and defending its sacred values and an unchangeable order, but rather a community of free nations, ready to test their own ideas and values in open space of human history, ready to meet all the challenges coming from the unknown future, ready to risk the possibility of failure or being wrong in their actions, ready to stake their reputation and knowledge and continue correcting their often tragic mistakes in the light of experience. Does not the readiness to seek the unity with ourselves, to seek the common good in the open field of human history and to care, as the old Socrates would put it, about the soul, still belong to the essence of our freedom? Is that not exactly what we Europeans, Americans, and all other heirs of the West still have in common? Is not the anti-Americanism so fashionable today in many parts of Europe, or the contempt and indifference for anything European here in the United States just a symptom of resignation to our common responsibility, a mark of our spiritual laziness and of our inability or even unwillingness to think and to act as true heirs of our Western civilization? Is not such an attitude just a cheap replacement of real political thought with sophistry and populistic rhetoric that may be applauded by the crowds but betrays the best of our common democratic traditions? Let me to be more concrete in my second remark and turn our attention from the high philosophical issues to the practical political questions concerning the current relationship between the Czech Republic and the United States. Looking back to our modern history, not only to all our achievements, but in the first place to all our failures, having in mind the Munich Conference of 1938, the communist coup d'etat in 1948, or the Prague Spring terminated by the Soviet invasion in 1968, the endemic problem of our Czech politics seems to be connected at one time with the lack, or at another time with the excess of political realism within our decision-making processes. The current stage of Czech U.S. relationship is offering us an opportunity, in my view, to correct this weakness and to secure our national interests in a way which would correspond to Masaryk's maxim to conceive the Czech question in worldly terms and respect at the same time the realistic advices of common sense. It is our Masarykian Wilsonian idealism that makes us an active player in the today's world struggle for democracy and against all new and old enemies of our Western freedom. That's why the Czech Republic, remindful of her own past, actively supports the dissidents and human rights activists in Burma, Belarus, China, Cuba, and everywhere else in the world. That's why we are trying to actively disseminate the ideals of our Velvet Revolution of 1989 and the know-how of our transition from state socialism to democracy, and by doing so to challenge the dictators. But this is also why we are highly skeptical in this context of utopias of any kind and don't believe that just words and declarations of solidarity can make a difference. In order to assist effectively those who still have to struggle for their freedom, for democracy and the respect for human rights in their countries, We seek to forge and strengthen all possible democratic partnerships and coalitions, which is barely possible without an active participation of the United States. We are advised by our experience and by our common sense that we need the United States to be strong and successful in the world leadership, and that our place in the world is and will be in the future in the US-led coalition of the willing. We simply cannot afford to be given a choice to side with Europe or with America. We need them to work together to defend freedom against all the threats, old or new, emerging in our increasingly and more globalized world. We need a pro-American Europe and pro-European United States. We need both of them as close allies. We need both to be aware of our common roots in one European Western civilization, both being in the position of its equal heirs in the beginning of a new era coming in the 21st century, the heirs understanding and capable of protecting by their words and concerted actions its legacies. In a nutshell, this is, in my view, the basic objective in which the new Europe of post-communist countries, liberated 16 years ago, must speak up and stand for today. This is, in my view, the core of that knowledge Václav Havel had in mind in his speech here in Washington in February of 1990. The knowledge that has come out of our experience of loss of freedom in all our encounters with totalitarianism during the short 20th century. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have about 15, 20 minutes until we close the meeting, and it's open to questions. The ambassador's willing to answer some. Could you please identify yourself if you do have a question? Anyone want to start? Okay.
The question I have is that both Czech Republic and Slovakia have been involved in a sort of a project of norm setting that's going on within the European Union, and you're about to take a post at the UN. What would you say to the United States to sort of get the United States involved in that project of international norm setting and international law?
I think that the United States has been involved in the process of norm setting from its very beginning, so I don't think that this advice would be necessary. Having said that, it's obvious that the United States, as a only remaining superpower in the world, as I said, is a slightly different position than many other countries. So obviously, I think that the healthy balance between political realism and idealism, between the readiness to act and reflect one's actions in the realm of international law, in the process of norm setting, it is an extremely interesting thing, but I'm convinced that the US politicians are very much aware of that challenge.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Frank Alsona with the Center for Free Cuba. I know that the Czech Republic has played an important role in Geneva, the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. There has been some discussion about the need to reform the Commission. I wonder, since you're going to be in New York at the UN, if you have something to say about the United Nations Commission on Human Rights and what the Europeans would like to see done in that regard.
First of all, I'm not a great expert here, but I can use my personal experience. When I had for the first time an opportunity to deal with the Commission for Human Rights, and Frank, you know pretty well what was the reason. It was our effort to bring back the resolution on Cuba in 1999, the efforts that failed a year ago. The US-led resolution lost in 1998. And I was for the first time exposed to a world of diplomacy I'm not particularly fond of. the worlds of people who have nice suits, good salaries, and are involved in all sorts of repetitive exercises, getting through, meddling through their own processes. But having said that, I was surprised how relevant and important was what we were doing, how closely it was observed by Cuban freedom fighters, and how important for them was that the International Committee was sending a clear message, eventually being able indirectly and in long-term perspective influence the situation in their own countries. After all, looking at Ted Russell here, we ourselves benefited greatly in our time from the international support and solidarity, and we are ready to use all mechanisms, all legal arguments to protect and pursue our cause. So my answer to your question is, I agree that the UN Human Rights Commission is a problem. Considering the countries playing sometimes active role in the Commission, world-known abusers of human rights, we don't need to speak only about Cuba, but Cuba, I think, is on the top of the list of the most experienced countries, knowing all the procedural rules of the Commission, that the reform is badly necessary. But I first would like to come and see and experience what the proposals are on the table, and I can guarantee to you that I will do my best that if I can do anything, that the outcome at least is meaningful from the perspective of those who struggle for human rights and who need a serious international debate concerning their problem.
Leonard.
Leonard Obelander, part of Friends of Slovakia and international consultant. In your role as permanent representative of Czech Republic to the United Nations, you'll be relating to U.S. Ambassador Bolton, who recently said that called for radical reform as needed in the United Nations, and stated that there are other alternatives that the United States can turn to. Besides the U.S.-UN relationship, the U.S. is a strong supporter of as a member of the OSCE. Last year, Dmitry Rupel called for sufficient resources for the OSCE to carry out its mission. This year, the OSCE Ministerial Conference is going to be in Ljubljana in the near future. How do you see the question of resources for the OSCE, where there is pressure to reduce those resources from some venues, in relationship to the United Nations? Is there a zero-sum takeaway from OSCE, adding to reliance on the UN, and in relation to that reform call? I know this is a tough question, but I think it's something that's
I don't know whether I am
faced.
able to give you a meaningful and cogent answer to your question, but I think that there's always kind of cohabitation between universal organizations such as the United Nations and regional structures and arrangements, which is the case of OSCE. First, looking on the regional level, obviously the question is, what is the role of OSCE in today's European political architecture? We have the Council of Europe now with almost everybody on the board, with the question obviously to be raised whether the, I would say, achievements and the level of like-mindedness achieved by the jurisdiction, let's say, of the European Court for Human Rights is not diluted by the fact that now the Russian Federation is part of the Council of Europe that has been admitted, and you can read today in the press what kind of laws are being prepared almost to outlaw international non-governmental organizations. So this would be a very serious question, and we don't have only the Council of Europe, we have the EU, we have NATO operating, I think that in the past 15, 16 years, there were many voices trying a little bit rationalize a European system and raising a matter of efficiency. Having said that, I'm still convinced that there is the place here for OSCE to play. But obviously, I'm not expert here, that the Russian arguments used in this context in the past year were not very encouraging. The strength of OSCE is still in monitoring elections, in maybe stabilizing the situation, making it more conducive for transition to democracy. But I think that there will be still many tests now, and we can look at Georgia, at many other parts of former Soviet Empire still labeled by some Russian politicians as they are near abroad, with all implications. And the relation between this regional and universal levels, obviously it's always up to the member states how much money they are able to pay, or they are ready to pay for the operations. I think that I don't see here a zero-sum situation. I think that Europeans will make their decision concerning their contributions to OSCE and to the United Nations separately. On the level of UN, most likely be good to think about more efficient peacekeeping and peace rehabilitating processes. But I think that the United Nations, and maybe with my reaction to your John Bolton's remark or allusion, that the United Nations will stay and hopefully slowly and gingerly, step by step and gradually will be able to absorb all challenges of the 21st century and to change after all to meet these challenges.
Yes, sir.
If we may, thank you. If we may shift gears a little bit. I'm Julian Josephson. I'm a science writer here in this area. The socialist regimes of the past left Czech Republic and Slovakia with an environmental situation that was, shall we say, less than pristine. And as I understand, much progress has been made, but that the two countries have a ways to go to play some catch-up ball to attain the standards that the European Union and other world bodies call for. Perhaps both ambassadors could comment a bit on what is the cooperation between the United States and Czech Republic and Slovakia on the scientific and professional level of attaining these standards and of overcoming what was actually a pretty fearful legacy that had been left by the years, say, 1949 to 1989.
Well, maybe my colleague, Slovak colleague, is better prepared to answer this question than I am. I'm aware of many forms of scientific cooperation, so I can imagine that in the area of environmental sciences there must be a lot of cooperation. But as far as the norm setting, I think that our context is the European Union. We had to comply with all requirements of acquis communautaire, and actually we have a chance to get some financial support from the European projects to achieve our goals, water, air, other forms of pollution or waste. You have said quite rightly, and I think that everybody can see it, that the situation now cannot be compared to the one 16 years ago. There really is a tremendous difference, and if change for better. You can start with amounts of sulfur dioxide in air, and you can go on and on. Obviously, much needs to be done, which is a nice political stock phrase, and the process hasn't finished. But I would certainly now rather put our problem into broader context. I don't see here too much left, I would say, being specifically connected with the form of government we used to have. It might be the case that still our consumption of energy in our factories is way too high. I think it's one of the highest in Europe, and then the policy of ČEZ, which is the state monopoly on the production and transmission of electricity can be challenged here. But as I said, I'm not a great expert, so I hope that this will be enough.
Well, thank you. Well, I can say I used to be, but I'm not anymore, because world is running at such a pace that it's hard to catch up with things which are so specific. But to tell you frankly, this is really, European-driven thing from 2 points of view. One, it's norm setting, and second, it's a physical money dedication and cooperation. To my view, there is very little cooperation, given the potential. Scientific and both commercial, because this is more and more issue of, or it's more linked governmental business entrepreneurship than ever before. Because we get norms set, and these are European, these are very tough. Sometimes these norms are tougher than American, sometimes American. They do have some margin of advantage over these. But this is mainly European-driven enterprise. I'm sometimes surprised that there are American companies who are not that much focused on this region, because now we got the huge spendings on the environmental projects. And so far, to my knowledge, this is mainly driven by European companies. That's a big funds dedicated from special chapters of the European Union funds for to specific projects. But maybe, on the European side, it's like Buy America Act, European money spent going to European companies. I don't know. I'm not an European Union expert on environment. But I think, there is a much of potential and big money spent, and there is little interest or a little focus on the American side of these. Maybe it should deserve better attention.
Thank you. Well, I think it's about 10 of the hour, and we actually have another point on the program. A presentation is going to be made by Mr. Michael Rokas of the Friends of the Czech Republic and Ambassador Ted Russell of the Friends of Slovakia. So please, sirs, if you would step up here.
I'm going to defer first to the founding chairman of the Friends of Slovakia, Ambassador Russell.
Ambassador Palos, it gives me a particular pleasure to thank you on behalf of Friends of Slovakia for this splendid presentation today. I particularly liked your remarks about fighting spiritual laziness and the need for common sense. I think you have shown those very much through your career. And if I could say that those of us in the American Embassy in 1988 and 1999, in 1988, 1989, stood in awe of your personal courage, that of your dad, Radim Palos, with whom we would also meet, and your intellectual firepower in trying to achieve something where 24 or so individuals were able to, in the end, overturn the power of a totalitarian state. So I just want to say that, one, we would like to honor your consistent support for human rights, your consistent support expressed in this speech of transatlantic relations and strong transatlantic relations, which I hope will continue, and your support, obvious in this presentation, of strong Czech and Slovak relations. So if I may, I'd like to present you with the Medal of Honor of Friends of Slovakia and wish you well in your new assignment.
The financial support that the American Friends of the Czech Republic are able to give to this lecture series is due to the fact that we received a gift honoring Mr. Thomas Gibby. And I would like to recognize that Tom Gibby is here with us this morning, and that we are indebted to the gift that honors him so that we can make this happen every year. Tom? Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, 100 years ago, my family were very active in Democrat politics in the state of Maryland. And they were close political allies of one Woodrow Wilson. They were also very close supporters of Thomas Masaryk. my childhood stories were hearing the reminiscences of my grandmother about Woodrow Wilson and about TGM. But being a baby boomer, the idea of close personal cooperation with leaders of Czechoslovakia was not really a possibility. So I am very grateful personally to you and signing Charter 77 and the risks that you took, your family took, to make it possible that for me as a fourth generation Czech American that things could come full circle, that we could once again enjoy the close ties with the people of Slovakia, the people of the Czech lands, and things are as they should be. So, with great gratitude, sir.
Thank you. Excellent.
This is for you, both of these.
Well, before we end this meeting, I'd just like to make an announcement that you're all invited to a reception across the hall, sponsored by the American Friends of the Czech Republic. And so please, after this meeting's over, proceed over there. And now join me in thanking Ambassador Paluš for a wonderful speech, and wish him good luck in his new post up in New York.
That's good. That's good.